If you enjoyed diving back into the dark, broody Gotham of Matt Reeves' Batman universe during The Penguin, get ready to be disappointed. It was announced that The Batman 2 has been pushed from its 2026 release date to October 1st, 2027. The film is set to begin production in the last half of 2025, and DC co-chief James Gunn cited Reeves working to perfect the script as some of the reason for the delay. The October 2nd, 2026 date, formerly held by The Batman 2, is being taken by a film coming from the Revenant director Alejandro González, Iñárritu, and Tom Cruise. Are we sadly sitting in a room playing Sonata in Darkness due to this Batman news?
Yeah, 2027 is pretty wild because that will make a full 5.5 years between the Batman and the Batman 2, which is just really unheard of when you're trying to create a franchise thing and you have a sequel sort of planned when you leave off the first one. It is a problem because you're trying to build momentum for the franchise and you lose a lot of that momentum. Now, we did have the Penguin this year, but still it's not enough to be able to connect. You've got that show wrapping up and then you're going to have essentially 3 years basically until you're going to get to see the follow-up to that. So there's tremendous amount of time stretched out for this franchise that you're going to have to deal with and you're going to have to convince people to come back to in some form. And it's looking at it, and you can look at it positively and say, hey, it's Batman. People are going to come see Batman. But if you want to look at it negatively and say, you built something and you did get some momentum and then you recaptured a little bit of that momentum on Max, but then now you're really going to lose a lot of that again. I think you can look at it that way. I think that type of thing, that type of time between properties is a franchise killer. You have to be careful with how you come back and try to market it and try to bring people back to the theater, especially when you have this other side conversation about what are we doing with Batman in the DCU as a whole, which we know there have been these announcements. We're doing Batman Brave and the Bold. It's this whole other thing. It's a different Batman. But as time goes on, you do have to wonder a little bit, like, what if Superman does perform very well at the box office? What if it does break $1 billion? Will there be conversations at Warner Brothers about how do we get this Batman and this Superman together? And how do we merge these two universes and everything like that? So it puts it in a weird place. And what I find most frustrating about it, I totally understand the conversation about we want to make a good movie, we don't want to rush it out. Totally get that, totally see that. But at the same time, I find the discussion around the script to be a little frustrating because we have heard it from both sides. We've heard Matt Reeves come out and say, we're going to start production soon because the script is basically done and I've basically finished it. And then just months later, you have the delay, and then you have James Gunn coming out and saying, well, the script isn't there yet. And so then you start to wonder, like, is it all burning down? No, I don't think so. I think DC Studios is fine, but I think it just kind of raises questions about, like, so what is it then? Like, is the script done, or was it done a certain way and wasn't sort of accepted by other people, or was it kicked back and forth, or did the Penguin itself change the conversation around the second Batman movie and cause them to rethink the way that they were going to do a certain storyline or whatever? And man, it's a long, you're talking about 5.5 years between movies. It's a tremendous loss, I think, for the momentum of the universe. I still really like the Matt Reeves Batman universe, but I do find this to be a bummer because of this big delay between. Again, it's not one of those things I'm sitting down and saying it's over and it's done and it's going to tank and crash and burn, but I think it now faces some significant challenges as you're looking forward to a 2027, which is it's a really long time away to project.
If I were them, my goal right now would be getting a really killer team that is a different team than the Reeves team and getting them on making another villain or some sort of smaller story a la the Penguin to go on Max, because if they could pull off what they did with the Penguin again, and they've got 2 whole years, which in TV time is a possibility. Like, you can make a TV series and put out another season of 6 episodes in that time frame, because right now, after the Penguin, these months is the most like clamoring we have been for a Batman 2. I am more excited for the Batman 2 than I was after the Batman 1, you know? And like, if they could pull something like that off again right before the next one and really drive us into the theater with like a really good setup series, I think that would be the smartest thing to do, because at least it would keep that universe alive in our brains, because right now this is really devastating, I think, to the momentum of this universe that I was feeling it, and 2026 already seemed too far away. Like, I was ready for the Batman 2 right now, and yeah, it's a bummer. I mean, I'm sad for that team, that even if they make a great thing, it's just going to feel like a long time.
Yeah, I think you guys mapped out the reasons that there should be, you know, cause for concern or reason for pause here, and the back and forth between Matt Reeves and James Gunn. And Jay, to your point, the fact that Matt Reeves was saying, you know, the script is nearly done, we're going to start shooting, you know, any time now, and the fact that this push is like a full year, that's kind of what is surprising. And I will come at it from a little bit of a different angle. Like, I fully acknowledge 5 years is a long time to wait between sequels, especially when that sequel was greenlit pretty much immediately after the movie came out and performed well. But 5 years is not completely unheard of. And, you know, James Gunn cited a couple of movies when he put some tweets out there. Guardians of the Galaxy, between Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 and 3, that was 6 years. And we know the behind the scenes issues with that, and those characters popped up in other movies, but there are other Marvel movies that happened with. Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. Again, that character popped up in between. But so I see where he's coming from in terms of that defense. And all that being said, I do not think he needs to be on the defense. I was a little surprised that people were riled up as they were about this news. I get it. It's disappointing, but you know, the word on the street is that the reason for these hangups with Reeves are personal issues. So I'm not going to speculate on that at all. But if you like what Matt Reeves did and want to see him continue that universe, which I imagine all of the people involved want to do, you got to give him that time and that space. And this is just another instance of where I think James just says too much, and he wouldn't have to be on the defense if he didn't say as much as he did. So he put out two tweets, and, you know, classic James Gunn, I think he should have stopped at one where he went on for two. So he had the one that said, hey, the script is being worked on, that's the reason for the delay. Great, stop there, you don't have to say anything else. But then he went on to compare it to other movies, which some of those comparisons work better than others. I cited a couple of them, but then he also talked about like Terminator and Terminator 2. Those do not work. Those are not the same. Those are apples and oranges. Those were movies that came out, did well, and then years down the road they decided, hey, can we revisit that? So you know, having said all of that, I do want to address the fact that we had a Clayface movie recently announced, and Andy Muschietti, who was supposed to be attached to Batman Brave and the Bold, he has recently said that movie is delayed. So I don't think we can ignore the possibility that they are probably trying to make Robert Pattinson the DCU version of Batman. And again, I think Robert Pattinson is probably down for that. He probably, you know, there are probably some things to navigate with Matt Reeves, because it sounds like Matt Reeves probably doesn't want to do that. But this train is going to move. Like, to your point, Jay, if Superman does well, we can't wait around forever for Batman 2 and Batman 3 so that we can get our DCU Batman. We're going to need that Batman sooner rather than later.
Just for some context, I was looking. I was curious about the Brave and the Bold, because that's DCU's Batman. Supposedly, it's coming one day.
Yeah, right.
We didn't have this in the rundown, but I'm seeing on Screen Rant, DCU's Batman reboot gets disappointing development update that they're also delayed. That makes me wonder if these are tied together in any way. This says it was 2 days ago. I don't know. This is on the fly, and I'm not the news collector guy, so I might be getting something wrong. But this is saying that they've delayed that as well, which, if that's the case, I think you're right onto something, Jay Scotty, that this might be them trying to merge those two ideas and see if it's a possibility that these two could live in the same world. Partially, I think probably some of the success of the Penguin. Like, if they try to bring, like, people are loving that Gotham so much and they're excited for the Superman, can those live in the same world? I think Marvel is a great example of bringing Thor and Iron Man together on the screen and making those things work that are so disparate tone-wise. Like, I think it's possible, even though they're very, very different worlds, it seems.
The Pattinson of it all was the first place I was going to go, because probably if he hasn't heard anything from them, he's just been doing other stuff, and we know that he's going to be in the new Christopher Nolan project that we'll talk about in the lightning round. So that's going to start filming next year, and they're slating other things. I mean, I think he's just, if you don't hear, you're going to take work elsewhere if you're an actor.
Sure.
Like, that's what they do. They're not going to sit around and just twiddle their thumbs and hope that Matt Reeves calls me. And so I think it's like just myriad issues. If it's a scheduling issue, it might be a writing issue. We still have a little bit of effect from the strikes happening. We can't discount that. That was just last year. It's kind of like, it feels like it was 80 years ago, but it wasn't. And so, and there is, it was 87 years. And I think Scotty, you're onto something, that they might be trying to find a way to bring Pattinson into the DCU. I could see it. They're gonna have to change the aesthetic of the Matt Reeves world a little bit. I mean, I could see what we saw from the Superman trailer working against Gotham of Matt Reeves, but I think that's kind of becoming the most likely scenario, because here's really popular stuff that people are really interested in. But I do still think there's a lot of people that still haven't watched The Batman simply because of the runtime. They literally sit down to watch it, and they're like, I can't do it. And like, they just don't. Like, I know people who have watched The Penguin without watching The Batman, and they're like, I'll get to it. And they're like, I got it. And I was like, okay.
Yeah, if you are David Zaslav, you are sitting in your office going like, how do we make this happen? Like, how do we merge these things? Because you have a popular universe built around Robert Pattinson with a creative team and a creative director, and you have a Max show built attached to it with an Oscar winner, like all this type of stuff. Like, it's built, it's there, it's created, and now you've got a whole DC universe, and you're telling me you're going to make that character again, and then you're going to run those concurrent, and you're going to have like, it's just that if you're looking at it from the business perspective, not the creative perspective, you're like, that's not going to work. Like, we have to find a way to put the action, to get both action figures out of the toy box at the same time, because that's going to bring the people together to create this Justice League around this Batman and this Superman. But then, you're looking at Matt Reeves' universe, and you're like, this is probably the most grounded superhero universe we've seen maybe on screen, and you're going to put that up against this James Gunn universe, which is clearly populated by these massively super-powered beings from space, and it becomes that meme of like, why didn't you call the Justice League if you're Batman? Like, if you have a threat, like, why didn't you just call Green Lantern or whatever down here, because you're just a guy in a suit? And it is complicated. I think it's very complicated in a way creatively to try to figure out how to merge these universes. You could definitely do it, no more multiverse. Like, you can figure out a way to do it, but it's just, I don't know. I think if I'm Matt Reeves, I don't love that idea. Like, I kind of like this aesthetic and this, and personally, just from my perspective, I totally see the call to do it. I see the benefits from a business perspective of doing it, but like, personally, like, I don't really want to mix those worlds. I really like that Matt Reeves universe as itself. I don't really want people flying in the sky in that universe all of a sudden. And so it is complicated. It's tricky, but I think that probably is, it has to be a conversation behind closed doors. And I think the truth of all this, why did it get delayed? We've already touched on it, but it is somewhere in the middle. It's production stuff. It's strike. It's script. It's what about this? It's all of these things happening behind the scenes. Things we don't know about. Things we do know about. It's probably not people hating each other and things. Matt Reeves and James Gunn yelling at each other. It's none of that. It's just the cost of doing business, and it's just stacked up against this movie. But it's created this unfortunate situation.
It further makes me think about how amazing Marvel pulling off what they did in 2008 to 2019 is, because I just keep looking at, like you said, Jay, like 5 years is not unprecedented completely. It's possible to, like, other franchises do it, but it's not the same thing all the time. I don't know. It's just a strange, like, the idea that Marvel had to make a movie and then we're going to have a sequel 2 years later and it's going to be good and it's not going to suffer and it's going to like connect the universe and if 2 a year, 3 a year, 4 a year, and they're going to build to a crescendo. Like, that is an impressive feat that Marvel hasn't been able to create yet. Yeah. Maybe they will. Maybe this next year is going to be showing us how well that they can do it again. But so far, they haven't been able to recreate it. And DC is trying, and DC has such a great setup. James Gunn is such a great creative force to put behind your universe. But it's seeming like these things of studio involvement, and I'm with you guys, you Jay. I think you said it that you don't want these combined, and I don't either. I think they should stay separate. But if they combined, I'd be there. Like I'd be there to see how it was done. I think it would be a fascinating attempt. But yeah, in my mind goes like maybe the reason Batman exists is because Gotham is like the smaller city that doesn't get the superheroes, and he's like putting on the cowl and cape and doing it as a human, and these metas are off in Metropolis and these bigger cities doing their thing. I don't know. But yeah, it does make for just a total tonal shift in the world for real.
People may hate this, but when we were talking about Spider-Man Haley, you mentioned Marvel taking inspiration from DC's animated universe, and I think James Gunn has been on record saying that he is taking inspiration from the original DC animated universe that started with Batman the Animated Series. So I think there's a way to have both. And again, people may hate this. They may see it as a half measure, but talking about keeping Matt Reeves, Elseworlds separate, but then also having Robert Pattinson, I think you can look to the animated series as proof of concept for that. The animated series were separated until they weren't. And we're all diehards, so we're in the minutia of the continuity and everything like that. But I think for more casual people that are just going to show up for anything Superman or Batman, they would be totally fine if Robert Pattinson's Batman showed up to do a team up with Superman, then went off to do his own thing again. I don't think they would question it all that much.
Yeah.
Well, and look at how we have Robert Downey Jr. coming back to the MCU in a completely different role. I mean, things could be done. I'm on the same page. Like, I would want them separate. And if I was Matt Reeves, I'm not trying to put words in his mouth, but if I was him, I'd be like, listen here. Like, I made this great thing before you all came along. Like, I think he does want to have that creative control over his different, because he's working on those other projects too. It's like, he's got the second season of his animated show, and then he's doing the Robbins movie, right? So he's got his, and Gunn's on that as a producer too, but I don't know. Like, if I was him, I'd be like, excuse me, I was already working on this before you came along. What do you mean?
It should also be said that the word delayed always has to be kind of loose with the DCU, because when all of these things were announced, there were no release dates. They never came out and said Superman's coming out here, Supergirl's coming out here, Batman Brave and the Bold's coming out here. It was just sort of like a vision board. It was like, we're going to do this, and tonally we're going to do this, and that was kind of the idea. So the idea of Batman Brave and the Bold sort of being like, well, where's this going to go now? Well, it never really had a release date in the first place. So it's always kind of been one of those things that's been out there. And we've seen DC do this more egregiously than Marvel, but Marvel's been guilty of it too, of announcing too much early. And I think, again, it's a studio interference thing. It's we have to get investors excited. We have to pitch all this stuff. We have to say, look at what we're doing. Get out there and tell them to invest their money in this company because they're going to get a return on it. And sometimes you shoot your shot a little too wide, and then all of a sudden you got to reel it back in as the years go on and the production starts to happen and things happen throughout production. But it just for perspective, we're going to have seen Avengers Doomsday and Avengers Secret Wars before we see the Batman Part 2, which is just kind of a crazy thing to try to get your head around.
I wonder if that's a little bit on purpose. You know what I mean? They're like, hey, how's this going to work out for Marvel?
I feel like it's always on purpose with Marvel, like kind of trolling DC a little bit with like constantly coming out with things that make their universe feel smaller or done or whatever. Even though these days I don't think it's necessary to be so competitive, but I think they seem to be.
I mean, always at the end of the day, we say this all the time, but the majority of people don't care that much about canon. We do, because we're fans of stuff, and we like sit there and get the markers and the dry erase boards out. We're kind of like, well, he was here and he didn't mention him, and now he's in this. And fans do that, and we do that. And if you do that, you're in good company. But most people don't do that. They're just like, oh, it's Batman and Superman. Like Kaylee, I think you said that. Like, it's like, oh, Batman and Superman are together. Let's go see the movie. And most people are like that. So it's the same with Superman. They see the Superman trailer and they're like, oh, I thought Henry Cavill was I guess they moved moved on to something else. All right, cool. I'll go see that one, or whatever. And that's it. That's the full extent of the thought. And yet we're sitting here saying, like, what about Zack Snyder's Justice League and blah, 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 or whatever. So you always just have to keep that perspective that there is a significant drop-off between those who care about canon and are like, but the universes are separate, and then those who just really don't know or care, if they even did know.
It reminds me of this conversation that happens a lot in the politics stuff that I follow. They're always talking about Twitter isn't real life, but also how impactful Twitter can be. Like the conversations that happen on Twitter between like these people that are like mining for engagement and talking about the things they or whatever like they care about so passionately. Normal people aren't thinking about the same things, but those conversations can kind of trickle out into the real world and the media and like whatever. And I think that happens here. It's like the geekosphere that we all live in is not real life. Like it is not like the most of people. You know what I mean? We have these very specific conversations about canon and this and that and what's happening. And most people don't care about that. But our conversations trickle out into the world. I mean, our thoughts about things, the way our community reviews things and tells our friends, oh, yeah, I'm not excited about that. Like, if you have a friend that doesn't care that much about geeky things, but they call you and they're like, oh, I heard there's a new Superman movie. Aren't you excited for the new Superman? But you're like one of those people who's like, yeah, I don't like it. They got rid of Zack Snyder and blah. This universe is going to be dumb and campy. Then your friends go, oh, okay, well, I'm less excited for it. Now, it's like the sort of like weird geekosphere influence on the rest of the world. Even if they don't care, it sort of seeps into the water or whatever.
Which is probably a good reason they brought so many influencers to do that trailer event.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure.
Like our own Bill Bria. Plug.
That's what I was gonna say.
Yeah.
Got
Bill
to go.
Yeah, good call.
Yeah, I keep we should have him on to talk about it. That's so cool.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
You just watched a clip from Multiverse News. If you liked it, go to our channel. We got a whole episode that it comes from. So go check that out and hit the like and subscribe. And we got lots of clips you'll enjoy, but also full hour-long episodes of Multiverse News with lots of things that don't even make it to clips. So check us out.
You stay clippy.